The flight attendant didn't even look at the boarding pass long. She looked at him. Her eyes moved from his dark skin to his worn backpack, and her mouth tightened as she had already decided the truth. Voice, English, same words as in my script. Sir, she said, loud enough for the passengers in the first row to hear, you're in the wrong section. Malik Carter stood in the narrow aisle of the plane with his ticket in his hand. First class. Seat 2A. He reread it, as if the letters might change. A man in a crisp suit leaned into the aisle and smirked. Maybe he picked up someone else's pass. A soft wave of laughter rolled through the cabin. If you care about powerful black racism stories and dignity, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Not everyone laughed, but no one stopped it. Malik's throat went dry. He felt that familiar heat of humiliation climb his neck. And then, he heard the words that always cut deepest. Let's not cause a scene, the attendant said, already reaching for the radio. We'll find you another seat in the back. Malik Carter was 38, tall, calm-faced, and careful with his voice. People often called him well-spoken, as if they expected something else. He grew up in a small apartment above a laundromat on the south side of the city, raised by a mother who cleaned offices at night. And still managed to braid pride into every morning. She taught him to be excellent because the world was not going to be fair. Don't let them shrink you, she used to say while tying his tie for his first internship interview. Inch your skin is not your limit. Malik learned early what limit looked like. It looked like teachers mispronouncing his name and never making an effort to learn. It looked like security guards following him through stores. It looked like interviews where the smile changed the second he walked in. He built his life anyway. Not with magic. Not overnight. With late nights, rejection emails, and the kind of patience that feels like swallowing glass. He became an operations executive at a mid-sized airline services company called Aeronex Support, one of those companies nobody notices until something goes wrong. Aeronex maintained ground equipment, coordinated fueling schedules, and managed logistics for dozens of flights every day. Their contracts kept planes moving. Their teams worked in the heat, the rain, and the midnight cold. Malik had climbed from an entry-level analyst to CEO. Not because he was lucky, but because he was prepared. He knew the numbers. He knew the people. He knew the work. Still, even with a title, racism didn't disappear. It just wore cleaner clothes. At conferences, people assumed he was the driver. In boardrooms, people spoke over him. Until he repeated his own idea, and suddenly it sounded brilliant. In airports, he noticed how often he was randomly selected for extra screening. So when his assistant booked him a first-class seat for an important meeting in another city, Malik didn't see it as a luxury. He saw it as a practical decision. He needed to arrive rested. He needed to present a contract renewal worth millions and thousands of jobs. But here he was, standing in the aisle, watching strangers decide his worth. By the shade of his skin. The flight attendant's radio crackled. Another attendant appeared, a younger woman, eyes wide and uncertain, as if she could feel the wrongness of the moment but didn't know how to name it. Sir, please step aside, the first attendant insisted. We need to let other passengers board. Malik stepped into the tiny space near the galley, pressed between a curtain and a cart, like he was being stored out of sight. People brushed past him. Some avoided eye contact. One woman glanced at him, then quickly looked away, as if guilt might be contagious. Malik held his boarding pass like a fragile thing. He wanted to shout, read it, he wanted to say, I belong here. But he'd learned something painful, anger from people like him was always called aggression. Even when it was justified. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Asterisk, you made it to the airport? Text me when you land. Love you, star dot. He stared at that word, asterisk love asterisk, and felt something inside him crack open. Love was not a seat. Love was not a title. Love was the quiet knowledge that he was a human being deserving of respect. The attendant returned with a forced smile. We can offer you an economy seat today, she said. First class is complicated. Complicated how? Malik asked softly. She glanced at him, then at the first-class row, where the man in the suit was watching like this was entertainment. We had an issue with duplicate boarding passes. Malik's voice stayed even. Then scan mine. Verify it. The attendant's smile stiffened. Sir, we're trying to help you. Please don't make this difficult. Those words asterisk "we're trying to help you" asterisk were a mask. Underneath was the real message, know your place. Malik took a slow breath. He looked at the passengers. Some were filming on their phones now, hungry for drama. He saw the younger flight attendant shifting her weight, uncomfortable. He saw a middle-aged man in first class looking down at his shoes, pretending not to notice. He felt the old shame rise, the one he carried from being a kid in a store aisle while a guard hovered behind him. The one from being told he didn't fit the culture for a job he was qualified for. The one from being called articulate as if that was surprising. But he also felt something else. A small spark. He remembered his mother's words, "Don't let them shrink you." Malik turned his boarding pass around so the attendant could see it clearly. C2A, he repeated, still calm. Please scan it. The attendant's eyes flickered. For a split second, Malik saw fear there, not fear of him, but fear of being wrong in public. Fear of having to admit she judged him. She didn't scan it. Instead, she lifted the radio again. We need a supervisor at the front, she said. The word supervisor landed like a threat. The suited man muttered, unbelievable, loud enough for Malik to hear. And that's when Malik made his choice. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to explode. He wasn't going to disappear. He was going to stand fully and clearly in his dignity. A supervisor arrived in a navy blazer with a pin on his lapel. He carried authority the way some people carry perfume, strong, confident, and meant to fill the air. What seems to be the issue? The supervisor asked, eyes already narrowing at Malik. The flight attendant spoke quickly, as if rehearsed. Sir, he's insisting he has a first-class seat, but Malik held up the boarding pass. I have a first-class seat. C2A. I've asked 3 times for it to be scanned. The supervisor didn't take it right away. He looked Malik up and down. That look was not about the ticket. It was about Malik's skin, his backpack, his presence in a space they had silently claimed as not for him. Sir, the supervisor said, let's step off the aircraft and resolve this. The cabin went quiet. That sentence wasn't neutral. It carried an accusation. Like Malik had already done something wrong just by existing too confidently. Malik felt every eye on him. He could almost hear the thoughts. He's causing trouble, why can't he just sit in the back? He should be grateful he's even flying. He spoke slowly, because he wanted every word to be clean and undeniable. I'm not stepping off this aircraft for asking you to honor a paid seat. Scan the boarding pass. If it's invalid, I will apologize and move. But if it's valid, I expect an apology. A few people shifted. Someone behind the curtain whispered, oh. The younger flight attendant's eyes met Malik's, and in them he saw something like relief, like she had been waiting for someone to say what was right. The supervisor's jaw tightened. He finally snatched the pass and scanned it. The scanner beeped once. Then it beeped again green. The supervisor froze. Malik watched the color drain from the man's face as the truth sat in his hand like a weight. Malik's boarding pass was real. Malik belonged in first class *** for a long second. The supervisor said nothing. The cabin held its breath. The suited man in first class looked away, suddenly interested in the window. The supervisor cleared his throat. There appears to have been confusion. Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. He simply said, confusion doesn't follow everyone. It follows certain people. Silence. Then Malik did something no one expected. He didn't walk to C2A immediately. He stepped slightly into the aisle so he could be seen, and he spoke not like a man seeking permission, but like a man reclaiming the space inside himself. My name is Malik Carter, he said. I run Aeronex support. My company coordinates ground operations and maintenance services for this airline in 3 major hubs. I'm traveling to finalize a renewal that affects thousands of workers, baggage teams, fueling staff, and technicians. A few heads snapped up. The supervisor's eyes widened. The flight attendant's mouth parted. Malik continued, voice steady. I'm not saying this to threaten anyone. I'm saying it because it should never have mattered. You should have scanned the pass before you judged my face. He looked at the attendant, not with hate, but with clear disappointment. You told me not to cause a scene. But the scene was caused the moment you decided I couldn't be in first class. The younger attendant swallowed hard. The supervisor's shoulders sank. And then Malik walked to seat 2A and sat down with quiet dignity, as if he had been doing it his whole life, because he had earned that right, the same as anyone else. The plane didn't take off on time. Not because Malik grounded it with power, but because the supervisor made calls, wrote reports, and tried to contain what had just happened in front of a cabin full of witnesses. Before departure, the supervisor returned. His voice had lost its edge. "Mr. Carter," he said, low enough that only Malik and the nearby passengers could hear, "I apologize. We handled that poorly." Malik nodded once. "Thank you. I accept the apology. But I hope you understand, this isn't just about me." The flight attendant stood behind the supervisor, eyes down. She looked shaken, like someone who suddenly saw herself in a mirror she didn't like. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin. "I'm sorry," she said. "I assumed," "Yes," Malik replied gently, "you assumed." When the supervisor left, the younger flight attendant came by later with a glass of water. Her hands trembled slightly as she offered it. "I saw what happened," she whispered. "And I'm glad you didn't let them move you." Malik looked at her and softened. "I was scared," he admitted. "I just didn't want my fear to decide for me." Hours later, when the plane landed, Malik walked through the terminal differently. Not with arrogance. With a grounded, quiet certainty. He still lived in a world where racism existed. A world where discrimination wore uniforms, policies, jokes, and mistakes. But he also carried something stronger now, proof that dignity could be spoken aloud, even in a narrow aisle where people tried to make him small. And the next week, Malik requested a meeting with the airline leadership, not to punish, but to change. He pushed for bias training that wasn't just a checkbox. Clear procedures, scan first, assume nothing. Accountability, report and review incidents. A message to staff that respect is not optional, and dignity is not a reward for fitting in. Because racism doesn't only harm the person targeted. It poisons everyone who witnesses it and stays silent. It teaches children that cruelty is normal. It turns public spaces into quiet battlegrounds. Malik's mother texted him later that night. "Did you land okay?" He replied, "I landed. And I didn't shrink, If you've ever been judged by your skin, your caste, your accent, your clothes, or your background, remember this: their assumptions are not your identity. You don't have to prove you deserve respect, you already do, and every time you choose dignity over shame, you weaken racism's grip on the world.